Hi there, I'm Brooke Baldwin. Just want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and all around the world. You are watching CNN's special live coverage of the disappearance of Flight 370. We are getting reports at this hour from British newspaper The Daily Telegraph that they have gotten a hold of this flight transcript. I'm talking about every word spoken from the moment before this plane took off until it vanished with that final verbal communication from the cockpit, those 4 words, all right, good night. But just to reiterate to you, as we're awaiting this news, CNN has not been able to independently confirm that this transcript is genuine. But the Telegraph is reporting that something they say is odd, that someone in the cockpit radioed in a message to ground control saying that they were cruising at this altitude of 35,000 feet. Sounds normal. Why might it be odd? Well, they had just told ground control that very fact 6 minutes previous. But overall, the determination here is that nothing seemed suspicious in these communications from ground control to the cockpit. We're waiting for more information on the transcript. Meantime, 2 days of searching, and there is no sign yet of possible debris picked out by a satellite scanning this remote part of the world, the southern Indian Ocean. More ships, more planes. They are on their way to the search area, about 1,500 miles off the west coast of Australia from Perth. So the task at hand is daunting. As I mentioned, this part of the world is remote. It is desolate. It is in a constant state of flux. So CNN's Tom Foreman is here in our virtual room to really help us understand what's involved in the search and what makes it so incredibly difficult, Tom.
Well, Brooke, you know, the reason that we're hanging on every word about everything about this investigation is they need something, some clue to narrow this down. They've tried to narrow it down to this little area right here, but they are racing time, and frankly, they're racing physics here. Look, that space was much bigger just a couple of days ago. Now it's down here. Why has it changed this way? It's changed this way because this is a very volatile part of the world, and every hour that goes by, the physics of the area are changing the search area and where they need to focus, and everything they search changes that. Let me talk about this a little bit, because when you talk about searching on a water environment, yes, you can fly satellites over to look for things. Yes, you can bring boats out there to look for things. But even if you spot something in this part of the world, you may have currents here that are moving at 2, 3, 3.5 miles an hour at any given moment. They're not constant. They go in all sorts of different directions. They tend to go east. But if one did go constantly and you threw a tennis ball into the water here, in 14 days, it could be hundreds or actually mathematically more than 1,000 miles away just based on the currents. So everything they're looking at keeps changing. And when you go below the surface, it gets even messier. Once you get down there beneath the waves, you have to deal with anywhere from 1 to 2 miles of water deep, depending on where you are in the Indian Ocean. And yes, you can send in something like a side scan sonar, which is sort of a towed torpedo-like thing that will actually paint a 3D image of objects on the bottom of the ocean floor. So you can look at it just as you would a big picture, and by studying the contours of that, you can say, well, is that part of a ship or something there?
Oh, wow.
But you know what? You can't do this over the whole ocean floor. That takes a lot of time to tow those through. You have to have a clue to get you close. And right now, even that big area we're talking about, way too big for an operation like this right now. Brooke?
So incredibly frustrating in just the vast nature. I was talking to a man who knows the oceans very well, and he said he was trying to figure out if there were any other part of the world that was more vast and isolated and not known, and he said he couldn't find it.
Yeah, it's the confluence of the Indian Ocean and the Southern Ocean, which is the ocean that goes around Antarctica, and it's a very explosive area, and it's just a difficult place to work.
Tom Foreman, thank you. And a lot of questions.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello everyone, I'm Aisha Sase. You are watching CNN News Center. We have been watching our sister network CNN USA and following the breaking news on missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. We are standing by and waiting at this hour because Britain's Telegraph newspaper claims to have obtained the transcript of the final 54 minutes of communications between pilots of that missing flight MH370 and ground control. This is what they are claiming. I must make it clear, at this point in time that CNN cannot verify what the Telegraph says it has. But I want to tell you what we know at this stage as we await the publishing of this transcript, the final 54 minutes of communication of that flight. According to the Telegraph, nothing stands out from that record except two things. The first, that the plane's suspected change in direction and the loss of communications occurred during the handover between controllers in Malaysia and Vietnam. The account also indicates the pilots repeated their flying altitude of 35,000 feet twice. They're saying they repeated that altitude twice in 6 minutes. But one expert quoted by the Telegraph said that could have just been a case of the pilots forgetting or just wanting to reconfirm that detail. As I said, CNN is standing by waiting for the Telegraph to publish what it says is the transcript of the final 54 minutes of flight MH370. I want to bring in our Richard Quest, who joins us from CNN New York with more details and analysis. And of course, Richard, as we await this publishing of this transcript, let me ask you what you will be looking for when we get this transcript.
Well, I've got the Telegraph website here open on the computer in front of me, and I'm waiting to see what it says. What I'm going to be looking for, excuse me, is anything out of the ordinary. And there's an argument that says, well, if everything is ordinary, then you've merely proved a negative, and therefore everything, well, you know, you've proved something simply by the fact that they didn't say anything out of the ordinary. But we already know that. Unless the Malaysians and the authorities are hiding something from the transcripts that they've already known, there is nothing earlier that we should have been told about or that we know about that should raise a flag. So from that point of view, if the Telegraph evidence or the Telegraph transcript is merely a long litany of air traffic control instructions to 370 to go to flight level 250, to squawk this, to turn right that, to increase its speed, or the normal run-of-the-mill everyday air traffic control, all that tells us is that things were going according to plan.
And do you find it odd, it is something cited in this article on the Telegraph website, that the pilots reconfirmed their altitude of being at 35,000 feet? What does that mean to you?
Absolutely nothing. Nothing whatsoever, for the simple reason, first of all, we don't know the mechanism by which they had previously said they were at 35,000 feet. Was it by data or was it by voice? If it was by voice, all that happened is 6 minutes later, one said to the other, you know, time to check in. You check in every 10 to 12 minutes or so. I do not find it suspicious at all. I mean, you know, the conspiracy theorists out there will run with it and off with the hares, and they will say it shows that somebody had taken over the plane, that somebody was in control, they knew they had to check in. There's not a shred to say that. Far more, if in doubt, stick with what's most likely. And what's most likely here is that the pilot didn't realize he hadn't just done it, or he thought it was about time to do it again, and he did it again.
And let me ask you about the significance of the timings of the conversation, so to speak, the intervals between, you know, the co-pilot, who we are told did the communicating in the cockpit with ground control. Will you be looking at the intervals within which they spoke to ground control? Will that make any difference?
You'd be looking to see what the instructions were, because if it was actually an instruction to do something from one side or a request from the other, you'd be looking at that to see what the space of time is. But if it was just more routine climb to flight, remember they're only 38 minutes into the flight, so in that first however long it was, 50 odd minutes or so, you would expect to see a certain number of air traffic control instructions, both on climb when you leave Kuala Lumpur. It's 54 minutes because it's probably got the taxi, it's probably got the pushback, the taxi, the takeoff, the initial climb, the climb out, and it's right into the cruise, and that would be about 50 odd minutes. So you're going to be looking for, there will be a lot of, you know, you would expect to see the permission to take off, the first initial climb, the climb to the cruise, and you'll be expecting to hear air traffic control give an instruction, the pilot not flying, who's doing the radios, who in this case sounds like it's the first officer, Fareeq Hamid. You'd expect to see him doing the read back, and that's what I'm looking to see, the instruction, the read back, and who said it.
All right, Richard Quest, do stand by for us. We're going to take a very quick break. We will have a lot more with Richard when we come back. Stay with CNN News Center.